him as the candidate and asking Americans to vote as if this was the time, as if their lives actually depended on it. So what is happening right now is basically the flip side of what happened. It's going to be a tough race, and interesting to see how the Republicans are going to fare on against the onslaught from their counterparts, the Democrats. So let's take a look at another paper. This is the Al Jazeera, and of course you have news from Asia, the US, South Korea is also making it to their front page. We have Canadian Foreign Minister presses China over detainee in Hong Kong. We have had a lot of geopolitics, hot geopolitics in that part of the country, and a lot of nations have wanted to give their opinion and to weigh in on this matter, and protests before COVID-19 were rocking Hong Kong quite hard. So this is just basically developing situation. Let's move on to another international agency and see what they are prioritizing this morning. And this is the CNN, and we're told First Lady offers sympathies to those affected by COVID-19. Her message was a sharp streak from previous speakers, many of whom glossed over the bitter realities of the crisis or ignored it altogether. But this is something that, would touch on the hearts of many in the United States, who have been hit hard by COVID-19, and therefore their losses are resounding, and therefore this would be an appeal to their emotions, obviously, and of course something that would tag to those emotions, and of course a good thing that she did choose to talk about it and address a matter that cannot be ignored. It is big in the United States, but we all know the devastation that has rocked the world because of COVID-19. Now, let's take a look at another story here. Trump or Biden, which candidate does China want in the White House? Now, geopolitics taking center stage right there, and obviously whoever China wants depends on how they would fare on in terms of matters of politics and trade, and they're swaying the UN. There's so many things that feed into this sort of decision a country would want, and China we do know is a superpower, so it will be interesting to see what this analysis tells us about that. COVID-19 super spreading event in Boston may have led to 20,000 cases, researchers said. Now they're taking a look at one of the elements, and this is owing to Dr. Fauci warning against premature authorization of coronavirus vaccine. This is also another element of health, but on the main story on health, they're taking a look at an event in Boston that can be that thousands of infections can be traced back to. Reminds me of another story from South Korea, where there was a super spreader in a church who was able to infect 5,000 people before they were able to figure out what in the world was going on. Then we have another one. Jacob Blake needs a miracle to walk again after police shot him, attorney says. Now this has to do with the very latest in political police brutality. We are told about that individual that was shot 7 times in the back in front of 3 of his children. So very interesting right there. But now let's take a look at what is happening in local news. Now we have joining us Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi shall be joining us to have a look at the dailies, but we can start off with the front page of the Standard. We are told that is actually the basis of our question: should schools reopen before January? Now, why you should not eat your school fees is what the front page is telling us this morning. Learning resumption. On a day community-based learning was blocked, CS Magoha says schools may reopen before January if COVID-19 numbers continue to fall, and we are having a graph there that continues to gives us a picture of how we are faring on in terms of those infections. And if this continues, then it will be a matter of time before kids go back to school, as opposed to that blanket statement that said all schools are going to be opened or reopened in January. So you need to be holding on to your school fees. That is what the Standard is telling us in tongue-in-cheek way. It's quite important to note this story is also making the front page of the Nation. Court slams brakes on community learning. A government plans for resumption of learning in estates of villages, and villages following the closure of schools, and COVID-19 pandemic has suffered a setback. This is after a court actually ruled that out and blocked it. So yesterday the ministry did go on and tell of course all stakeholders that they should be prepared to go back to school in the event that we are not having such a severe spread of COVID-19. Now, court puts the brake on community learning plan. That is what is the headline for that. And then we have funds for schools released at last. But this is another story on the back page of the Nation that's also on that topic. We're told 500, the amount the ministry has released for the infrastructure per student, raising concerns among head teachers. You know, initially they had said that these funds are going to be released. The school heads were happy, those affected were happy, but then apparently the numbers, there was a shadow of doubt cast on the numbers that were sent out to the ministry. So they had to do an audit and figure out whether this is the real portrayal of the number of board teachers that you know schools have, and therefore this led to the delay. So at last we are seeing these funds being dispersed, and if you want to know more, you need to take a look at the back page of this Daily Nation and the front, the page 6 of the Standard to know what is happening as far as the education is concerned. A quote here by the Education CS George Magoha says, "You are aware the virus is starting to look like it is going to stagnate. So we are saying, should the situation change, we shall be ready and willing to look at the scenario once again in the interest of our children." And also on that, you remember yesterday we did have a conversation surrounding that, and we were trying to look at the practicality of having community learning, whether the setup and the infrastructure is practical, and at the same time the content of whatever syllabus they shall be using, because they were obviously not going to be able to stick to the current syllabus that they have as they await to have you know, schools reopened. So that story is on page 6 of the Standard. As you can see right there on your screen, a picture right there is CS Magoha with fellow education leaders at Kisii National Polytechnic yesterday. And the numbers we have been given right there to give you an overview. As of August the 25th, 32,803 is the total number of confirmed cases. Then we have 429,513 being the total number of samples tasted so far. And in the last 24 hours, the sample tested were 4,149 and confirmed cases were 246. Of those, 170 were male and 76 female. We have 19,055 the number of recoveries, while the deaths unfortunately stand right now at 559. Nairobi continues to be the leader in terms of COVID-19 infections, followed by Kiambu, then Kisumu, Machakos, Garissa, Lamu, Migori, then Turkana, Uasin Gishu, and last on that list is we have Bungoma, Busia, Kakamega, Nyamira, Tana River, Isiolo, and Tharaka Nithi, all with one confirmed case each. Then we have fluid COVID-19 peak in Kenya. Additional 246 people have tested positive, as those numbers have indicated right there. And we're being told that some of the cases might be missed because owing to the constraint of having the reagents. As we have seen in recent development that we have had a huge problem with that, and of course the supplies that it takes to test for COVID-19. But hopefully the graphs that we're being given that show that the graph is going down are factual, and we can look forward to the schools reopening, as both papers are telling us and as the CES asserted. Now, joining the conversation is Sakwa Bunyasi Nambale, Member of Parliament. Welcome to the show, Honorable Bunyasi. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Trix. Unfortunately, I can't get a video, but I can hear you.
Yes, so let's start with this story on schools. Now, the front page says, why you should not eat that school fees, because we might be reopening schools given the numbers are going down. And we also have that this is coming hot on the heels of news that a court actually blocked and put the brakes on community learning that was supposed to help keep children busy as they stay away from schools in the hopes that they can learn something at least as they look forward to, going back to school in January next year. But that might not be what happens. So what do you make of this development? Is it good? Is it bad? Where do you stand on this? And how should we be preparing for that particular possible reopening of schools?
Thank you very much, Chris. This gives a ray of hope to parents and to the nation at large, because the keeping students at home all this time has been putting a little pressure on everybody, the children and the parents. But with that, as of today, I think it's important first to commenting on the possible school opening itself, that there are risks. In the event that the facts don't turn out to be as they're expected to be, there is a major risk that they may have to again reverse that, because international evidence is showing that numbers go COVID spread.
Yes.
And children are back to school for various reasons. So there is a risk there. The third thing is also that they just said the other day that the equipment is not working. We don't have agents, the testing kits are inadequate. So when the curve turns down, we don't know if it is a natural curve, meaning that's indeed what's happening with the population at large, or whether it's because we are no longer measuring, no longer testing. So we don't know what's happening. The cases that we have are the ones that are voting. So the risks are indeed all round. An important element I would think would be that government should audit each commercial system audit to be sure that even though the kids have not adequate wages and not enough, and all these challenges in the financial of it, that there are assessment of the crowd coming, that's happening dropping sharply, that is factual, very worrisome. So the whole thing is still murky, and I think to be the role government must say, let's try this, then work, then we can gain.
Okay, and we seem to have...
No.
Okay, so let's take a look at another story that is making headlines both on the Daily Nation and the Standard this morning. Governor Obado and 4 children to be arrested, and that's the headline on the Standard, and the story is being covered on page 4. While on the Daily Nation, we're told Obado and his 4 children, same case, face arrest in theft case, and this is following investigations that have been ongoing for quite a while now. The DPP has given detectives the green light to arrest Migori Governor Kin, his business associates, and staff over what is being alleged as embezzlement of 73.5 million shillings from the county coffers. Now on page 4, we're being given more details on this particular story. The DPP has described this particular situation as a web of conspiracy involving business associates through proxy companies and company staff. And the EFCC also sought Haji's consent to charge the individuals with 4 counts of conspiracy to commit an offence of corruption, conflict of interest, unlawful acquisition of public property. It will be interesting to see how this one goes. We're told that we are having a situation where investigations are further revealing that even family members, close family members of these companies were involved. One has had their mother and brother arrested because of that close connection to this web, as the DPP has put it, of corruption that has been emptying county coffers. So this is according to the Standard. Let's take a look at the Daily Nation and the angle they're picking with it. One of our local journalists termed it as the money heist, alluding to what is happening, that Netflix show. But clearly the web is indeed complex, and we are being told on page 6 of the Daily Nation this morning that Obado will be facing arrest. Those EACC want taken into custody has been outlined here. The DPP and the EACC want Obado's children arrested alongside their mother, Penina Ouma Otago, Mr. Peter Kwaga's spouse, Christine Akinyi, and his sister-in-law, Caroline Onyango. Clearly a family affair there here. Mr. Kwaga has been appointed to the Kenya Institute of Mass Communication Board by ICT Cabinet Secretary Joseph Musheru, despite being under those investigations. Now, Honorable Sakwa, could you tell us what you make of this ongoing situation?
It's a missing beginning the remark of the telephone link, but the telephone on that's what we're talking about, right?
Honorable Sakwa, I'm struggling to hear you. Can you hear me clearly? I would like your take on the ongoing investigations into corruption in Migori County. What we're having Governor Obado having his family members arrested because they have been traced in a web of conspiracy to commit corruption, amongst other charges. This is the DPP working in conjunction with the EACC, and apparently this is a far-reaching situation that will have this man under investigation alongside a lot of proxy companies and, people affiliated with him tagging along in this particular graft probe. So what do you make of this, and what needs to happen going forward?
Thank you very much. This is really a sad story at a human and personal level. But as they say, justice delayed is justice denied. The cases around Governor Obado, of the various cases around Governor Obado, ought to have been put on continuous track until a resolution is reached, during which time he should have stepped aside as governor so he can concentrate on this. But DPP too, they should really deal with this in one long swoop and be done with it. I think it's probably representative of what is happening in many homesteads that are in families that are in corruption, because it will involve sisters, wives, children, and so on. We've seen that in other cases in this country. So it's sad, but I think that they ought to get the DPP ought to get his act together, get this thing going on in court, despite the constraints in court, make it continuous so they can get a resolution. The people of Migori then will have the governance system back, and the others around the country hopefully will be playing ball as well. I think it is sad, but it has to be done, but it should be done with speed.
Now, when we see it happening at this level, where we are just a few months away from them having to choose another leader, do you think more could be done to ensure that there's accountability at the county level? Because by the time we're talking about these astronomical figures, the people on the ground are the ones who have been suffering.
Indeed, it's absolutely true. But in fact, perhaps in a way, the timing or the proximity of election shouldn't even bother us. It should push the system to move even faster, because there are many Obados around the counties, as we have heard in prior coverage of the issue. And I think, and Wananchi are suffering. Services are not going through, particularly in the health sector at a time of this COVID crisis. The COVID governance itself, around the ministries, the funding, we've been told that lots of money, 40-something billion, is also missing. I think it's just a huge crisis, a huge national crisis. For me, it's virtually a national emergency. The issues around corruption, how they're impacting the delivery of public services, how the courts are not able to resolve them fast enough, how we still hear stories of the DPP and ESCC not agreeing and files not conforming to thresholds. This now all seem like excuses, and they can no longer delay this because this is in everybody's face, and it's affecting households, individual, ordinary people know that this crisis is leading to a lack of services.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a big matter at least.
And I love that you brought up the issue of corruption impeding the delivery of services. We have had a lot of speculation on COVID profiteers and what's happening with those funds. And there is a close eye, both by the media and the agencies mandated with, conducting investigations on corruption, on how KEMSA is going about this particular matter. But while that happens, we're having a back and forth between the DP, William Ruto, and ODM leader Raila Odinga. So what do you make of that? On today's Daily Nation copy, we're having DP accuses ODM chief of doublespeak on the theft of COVID-19 funds. This is owing to his history of being very outspoken when it comes to matters of corruption. But then we had the Secretary General for ODM, Edwin Sifuna, yesterday saying that what they're discouraging is blanket accusation, but they are for an audit. What do you make of this particular developing story?
I think it clearly shows that this corruption ball is right in the field, is being played by various parties, but not political parties, various groups of people. And when you see these accusations between the DP and ODM leader, I find that those kinds of accusations collectively as a distraction. So that now we have headlines about the feuding that has been going on, the political feuding between the two, simply using COVID as an excuse. But we know that the loss of COVID funds lies squarely in the hands of certain officials that have been mentioned. It is possible that when the web spreads, it will spread into all these quarters that we are saying on headlines. It is possible. So again, the DPP and the investigative agencies must work with speed and must realize that these things are of extreme importance. And I think they should put, if there are any political obstacles, if there are any, they should put those obstacles at the feet of the president. That's what the CEO is known.
As we wind up on that particular conversation, I'd like also for you to tell us about, in terms of investigation, should we be aiming at stopping any ongoing loss of funds, or should we be focusing on who did what when? Because at the same time, we're dealing with an ongoing crisis, which is COVID-19, and those funds are still very much needed right now, and some would even say urgently.
Track the loss of funds. And as we track the loss of funds, the second part will come out. Where do the funds go? And wherever they have gone, there is an institution, there is a bank, there is an individual, and the individual is involved directly in terms of carrying out the money or other